He stopped at the motor pool before changing posts. The rear door of the Duchess's car was unlocked, hanging open by a hand's width. It was logged as sealed. He checked the time, then the hinges, then the footwell. A child's ribbon lay beneath the seat. He did not touch it. He stood there longer than protocol allowed, listening to the quiet engine ticks cool, aware that nothing here should be out of place. The motor pool sat under yellow security lamps, 6 vehicles parked in diagonal rows beneath a steel canopy. It was 23:17. The guard had finished perimeter rotation and was crossing toward the staff corridor when he noticed the rear door of the Duchess's Range Rover hanging open, not wide, but enough to catch shadow against the overhead light. He stopped. The vehicle logbook was posted on a clipboard near the entrance. He checked it without touching the car. The Range Rover had been marked as sealed at 19:45 after returning from an afternoon engagement in Kent. No movement since, no service scheduled. He walked back to the vehicle and stood beside the open door, scanning the interior without entering. The leather seats were clean, no bags, no clutter. The footwell was empty except for the standard rubber mat. Then he saw it. A ribbon. Pale blue satin, no longer than his palm, folded once and lying flat beneath the driver's seat. It had a small clip on one end, the kind used to fasten a child's hair. He did not touch it. Instead, he stepped back and checked the doorframe. No pry marks, no damage to the lock. The door had been opened from the inside or left unsecured after the last authorized use. He returned to the logbook and traced the day's entries. The Duchess had attended a garden reception at Chevening House, departure logged at 14:20, return at 19:32. Driver, senior chauffeur M. Holt. Passengers, Duchess alone. Vehicle sealed upon arrival. The guard flipped back 2 pages and cross-referenced passenger manifests. The young princess, age 7, had been scheduled for a separate engagement that afternoon, a private tutoring session at Kensington Palace, logged from 1400 to 1730. No travel, no vehicle assigned. He looked at the ribbon again. It was small enough to overlook, light enough to be displaced by air or motion, but it had not been there during the morning inspection. He had been part of that shift. The vehicle had been cleared and logged clean. He returned to the car and used his phone to photograph the ribbon in place, capturing the angle, the lighting, and the position beneath the seat. Then he photographed the door, the latch, and the logbook entry. He did not narrate. He did not explain. The images were date-stamped and geotagged automatically. At 23:29, he secured the door and tested the latch. It clicked. He returned to the corridor and filed a deviation report through the internal system. Unsecured vehicle, minor item recovered, cross-reference advised. The report went to the duty officer. By 23:47, he was standing in the break room waiting for the next shift briefing when his phone vibrated. It was a message from Captain Dryden, head of Close Protection Logistics. "See me before you log off." The guard did not reply. He finished his tea, rinsed the cup, and walked to the administrative wing. Dryden's office was at the end of a narrow hallway, door half open, light spilling into the corridor. He knocked once. "Come." Dryden sat behind a desk cluttered with files and a single laptop. He was 52, grey at the temples, with the kind of posture that came from 30 years in service. He did not look up immediately. "You filed the vehicle report?" "Yes, sir." "Walk me through it." The guard recounted the sequence: the open door, the ribbon, the logbook, the timeline. He kept his tone neutral and his details precise. Dryden listened without interrupting. When the guard finished, he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. Did you touch the item? No, sir. Did you enter the vehicle? No, sir. Good. Dryden paused. The ribbon, you're certain it wasn't there this morning? I was part of the inspection team. The vehicle was cleared. Dryden nodded slowly. He opened a drawer, pulled out a printed schedule, and scanned it in silence. Then he closed it and looked up. The princess was at Kensington all afternoon, confirmed by her detail, no travel. Understood, sir. So how does her ribbon end up in the Duchess's car? The guard did not answer. The question was not meant for him. Dryden set the schedule aside and leaned forward. I'm not dismissing your report, but before this goes further, I need you to understand something. The Duchess's movements are covered by a different protocol tier. Any inquiry into her schedule requires clearance from the private secretary's office. That takes time. It takes justification. Understood. Do you have justification? The guard met his eyes. A child's property in an unsecured vehicle with no documented passenger, that's a breach of baseline safeguarding. Dryden's expression did not change, or it's a ribbon that got transferred by accident, laundry, a staff member, a dozen explanations that don't require escalation. Then we confirm which one. We don't confirm anything. You file, I review, I escalate if warranted. The guard held his position. Is it warranted? Dryden exhaled slowly and closed the laptop. You've been in service how long? 4 years. Then you know how this works. Every detail around senior royals is managed through channels. If we investigate every ribbon, every glove, every stray item that crosses paths between households, we'd spend more time auditing than protecting. This isn't a glove. No, it's a child's hair ribbon in a car that returned hours ago. You photographed it. You logged it. That's procedurally sound. But before I pull a vehicle manifest, cross-check staff movements, and request testimony from a sitting duchess, I need more than a ribbon. What would qualify as more? Dryden's jaw tightened. Pattern, repetition, a second anomaly. Right now you have an outlier. Outliers get noted. They don't get escalated until they become trends. The guard considered this. He understood the logic. He also understood what it protected. If there's a second anomaly, it means the first one was ignored. It means the first one was insufficient. There's a difference. Not to the child. The silence that followed was long enough that the guard heard the clock tick twice. Dryden leaned back and rubbed his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its edge. I'm not your enemy here. I'm telling you how the system works because you're young enough to think it shouldn't. But it exists for a reason. We protect people. That includes protecting them from unnecessary scrutiny, from rumors, from internal inquiries that go nowhere but leave stains. And if the scrutiny is necessary, then it'll come to light on its own. The guard did not respond immediately. He thought about the ribbon, folded and still beneath the seat. He thought about the princess, 7 years old, somewhere in the palace under someone else's watch. I'd like the report kept active. Dryden studied him for a moment, then nodded. It stays in the system. If something else surfaces, we'll revisit. Until then, you return to rotation, and you do not discuss this with anyone outside the chain of command. Clear? Clear. Good. Dismissed. The guard turned and left the office. He walked back through the corridor, past the break room, and down the service stairs to the lower staff quarters. His shift had ended 20 minutes ago. He was expected to rest before the morning rotation. Instead, he sat on the edge of his bunk and opened his phone. He scrolled through the photos he had taken, the ribbon, the door, the logbook. Then he opened the internal directory and searched for the princess's protection detail. Officer L. Marsh was listed as primary day escort. The guard had worked with her once during a public event. Calm, precise,
15 years in service. He composed a message, then deleted it. Too direct, too early. He set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. The ribbon had not appeared by accident. Children did not lose belongings in vehicles they never entered, and vehicles did not unseal themselves. Someone had opened that door, someone had been inside, and someone had decided not to log it. He thought about Dryden's words, pattern, repetition, a second anomaly. He would wait, but he would also watch. At 0600, the guard was back on duty, stationed near the East Gallery during the morning briefing. The princess's schedule was posted on the daily rotation board. 900, breakfast in the nursery. 10:30, music lesson.
At 13:15, the princess appeared in the garden with Officer Marsh and Nanny Calloway. The guard watched from the terrace, maintaining his assigned post but keeping the child in peripheral view. She wore a yellow dress and white shoes, her hair tied back with a ribbon, green, not blue. She played for 20 minutes, then sat on a bench while the nanny read to her. The guard saw nothing irregular, no distress, no hesitation. But he also noticed that Officer Marsh kept her phone in her hand, checking it more frequently than usual. At 1400, the guard's shift ended. He logged off and returned to quarters, but sleep did not come easily. The ribbon was gone, the report was stalled, and somewhere in the palace, a 7-year-old girl had been in a vehicle she was never supposed to enter. He stared at the ceiling and waited for the pattern to repeat. The guard's next shift began at 1800, assigned to the state corridor during a small private dinner. The guest list was minimal: the Duchess, 2 senior aides, and a representative from a charitable foundation. No children, no Prince William. The princess's schedule showed her in the residential wing, supervised by her usual detail. He stood near the service entrance, positioned to monitor both the corridor and the stairwell access. The dinner was expected to last 90 minutes. His role was static, visible but unobtrusive, a reassurance rather than an active participant. At 1847, Captain Dryden appeared at the far end of the corridor. He walked with purpose, his stride controlled, his expression unreadable. He did not look at the guard until he was 3 paces away. "Step outside." The guard followed him into the adjacent hallway, a narrow service passage lit by overhead fluorescents. The door closed behind them, muffling the distant sound of conversation from the dining room. Dryden turned and kept his voice low. "Your report from last night." "Yes, sir. It's been reviewed by the private secretary's office." The guard waited. "They've determined that the ribbon likely transferred during a separate engagement earlier in the week. The Duchess's vehicle was used for cross-estate transport. Staff confirmed that several items were moved between vehicles during setup. The ribbon is believed to have been displaced at that time." The guard absorbed this. The vehicle was inspected Wednesday morning. It was cleared. Inspections focus on security threats, not personal items. A ribbon could have been missed. It wasn't in the footwell Wednesday. I was part of that team. Dryden's eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you certain, or are you assuming?" The guard paused. He replayed the inspection in his mind, the seats, the trunk, the floor mats. He had not looked beneath the driver's seat specifically. That area had been covered by the lead inspector. "I can't confirm it wasn't there, but the timing aligns with Tuesday's movement, not Thursday's." "Timing aligns with your observation on Thursday. That doesn't confirm when it arrived." The guard said nothing. Dryden folded his arms. "The private secretary's office has closed the inquiry.
The ribbon has been returned to the princess's household. The vehicle has been cleared for continued use. There is no security breach, no safeguarding concern, no further action required. Understood, is it? The guard met his gaze. The door was unsecured, that's documented, and attributed to a latch malfunction. The vehicle's been serviced, the issue is resolved. Was the latch tested before the service? Dryden's jaw tightened. You're questioning the findings. I'm asking if the latch was tested. It was examined by the mechanics. No fault was found, but as a precaution the mechanism was replaced. The vehicle is now fully compliant. The guard processed this. A latch malfunction was plausible, but replacing the mechanism meant there was no physical evidence left to verify the original claim. What about the logbook? The Duchess's vehicle was logged as sealed at 7:45. If the latch failed, it would have been noted during the inspection, unless the failure occurred after the inspection, in the 15 minutes before I found it. Mechanisms fail, that's why we service them. The guard felt the weight of the conversation shift. This was no longer about a ribbon, it was about whether he would accept the explanation or continue pressing. I'd like to see the service report. Dryden's expression hardened. You don't have clearance for maintenance records on senior royal vehicles. Then I'd like to request it. Request denied. The silence between them stretched long enough that the guard heard footsteps in the corridor beyond the door, staff moving between rooms, unaware of the conversation happening 10 feet away. Dryden exhaled and softened his tone, though the firmness remained. Listen to me. You did your job. You reported an anomaly. It was investigated. It was resolved. What you're doing now isn't diligence, it's overreach. And overreach in this environment doesn't protect anyone. It just creates noise. Or it prevents something from being overlooked. Nothing is being overlooked. The private secretary's office reviewed every detail. They have access to information you don't. They made a determination based on the full picture, not a single data point. Then let me see the full picture. Dryden stepped closer, lowering his voice further. You don't get to see the full picture. That's not how this works. You see your post, you see your shift, you see what's in front of you, and you report what doesn't fit. After that, people with more context and more authority make the call. You trust the system, or you don't belong in it. The guard held his ground, and if the system is wrong, then it corrects itself, but not because a 4-year guard with a photograph of a ribbon decides he knows better than 30 years of institutional process. The words landed with precision. The guard felt them not as an insult, but as a boundary being drawn in real time. I'm not trying to override anyone. I'm trying to make sure a child is safe. She is safe. She has a full detail. She has vetted staff. She has more layers of protection than almost anyone in the country. What she doesn't need is a guard creating alarm over an explained incident because he doesn't like the explanation. The guard wanted to argue, but he recognized the futility. Dryden wasn't dismissing him out of malice. He was defending a structure that had kept people alive for decades, a structure that required trust, hierarchy, and restraint. What do you want me to do? Return to your post, complete your shift, move forward. And if something else happens, then you report it, same as you did this time, but you don't go looking for it. You don't start auditing logs or questioning staff or turning a resolved matter into a crusade. Clear? The guard hesitated, then nodded. Clear. Good. Dryden opened the door and stepped back into the main corridor. The guard followed, resuming his position near the service entrance. Dryden walked away without another word. The dinner continued. The guard stood in silence, watching the hallway, his mind replaying the conversation. He understood the message: drop it, move on, trust the process. But he also understood what had not been said. The private secretary's office had reviewed the matter quickly, too quickly for a thorough investigation. The latch had been replaced without independent testing. The ribbon had been returned without forensic confirmation of its origin, and the logbook discrepancy had been explained away with a mechanical failure that left no evidence. Everything had been resolved in a way that closed the inquiry without answering the underlying question: how had the princess's ribbon ended up in a vehicle she was never supposed to be in? At 20:30, the dinner concluded. The Duchess departed through the main entrance, escorted by her personal aide. The guard remained at his post until the corridor was cleared, then logged off and returned to quarters. He sat on his bunk and opened his phone. The photos he had taken were still there, date-stamped, geotagged, untouched. He had not been ordered to delete them. That omission felt deliberate. He opened the internal directory again and found Officer Marsh's contact information. This time he did not delete the message. Officer Marsh, need a word when you have a moment. Routine follow-up, nothing urgent. He sent it before he could reconsider. The reply came 6 minutes later. 0800 tomorrow, staff canteen. The guard set his phone down and lay back on the bunk. He had been told to move forward. He had been told to trust the system, but he had also...
So she had it Tuesday night? Yes. And Thursday? She wore a different one. Green. It's still logged in her wardrobe inventory. The guard leaned back slightly. Then the ribbon couldn't have transferred Tuesday. She had it after that event. Marsh's frown deepened. Where was it found? In the Duchess's car, rear footwell, driver's side. The vehicle was logged as sealed, but the door was unsecured when I found it. Marsh said nothing for several seconds. Then she set her cup down with more force than necessary. That doesn't make sense. I know. The princess wasn't in that vehicle. I was with her the entire day. She didn't leave the residence. She didn't see the Duchess. She didn't go near the motor pool. I believe you. Marsh's eyes narrowed. But someone thinks she did. The guard shook his head. The inquiry was closed. The explanation is that the ribbon transferred earlier in the week and was missed during inspections. That's bullshit. I know. Marsh leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper. If she was in that car and I didn't know about it, that's a breach, a serious one. It means someone moved her without authorization and without her detail. Or the explanation is accurate and we're seeing a problem that isn't there. Marsh stared at him. Do you believe that? The guard met her eyes. No. She sat back and exhaled slowly. What do you need from me? Access to her schedule, detailed logs, any gaps or irregularities. I can't give you that without clearance. Then get clearance. From who? Dryden? The private secretary? They've already closed this. Then we wait for the next one. Marsh's expression darkened. And if there is a next one, it might be too late. The guard said nothing. He had made his choice. Now he was asking her to make hers. Marsh picked up her tea, drained it, and stood. I'll pull the logs, quietly. If there's a gap, I'll find it. But if this comes back on me, I'm telling them you pressured me. Fair. She walked away without another word. The guard remained seated, watching the canteen slowly fill with morning staff. He had crossed a line. He knew it. Dryden had told him to move forward, and instead he had recruited another officer to help him dig deeper. But he also knew that the ribbon had not transferred by accident, and somewhere in the palace someone knew exactly how it had gotten into that car.
The guard spent the next 2 days on standard rotation, perimeter checks, corridor duty, and one overnight shift monitoring the service entrance during a private family gathering. He did not see Officer Marsh. He did not receive any messages. His report remained filed but inactive, and Captain Dryden did not summon him again. On the third morning, at 06:30, his phone vibrated. Loading Bay, 0700, bring coffee. The message was from Marsh. The guard dressed quickly, skipped breakfast, and stopped by the staff canteen long enough to pick up 2 paper cups. He walked to the loading bay through the service corridors, avoiding the main routes where cameras tracked movement more closely. The loading bay was a wide concrete platform used for deliveries and equipment transfers. At this hour, it was empty, except for a single panel van parked near the ramp. Officer Marsh stood beside it, her back to the wall, her arms folded. The guard approached and handed her one of the cups. "Thanks." She took a sip without looking at him. They stood in silence for a moment, both watching the empty driveway beyond the gate. I pulled the logs. Thursday afternoon, the Princess's schedule shows continuous supervision from 1400 to 1830. No gaps, no deviations. You're certain? I'm certain of what's written, but there's a problem. The guard waited. Marsh pulled a folded paper from her jacket and handed it to him. It was a printed copy of the duty log, marked with timestamps and initials. She pointed to a section halfway down the page. Here, 1540 to 1610. That's logged as garden play, supervised by Nanny Calloway. My initials are here because I was on perimeter, but look at the secondary log. She unfolded a second sheet, a vehicle movement log from the motor pool. She pointed to an entry near the bottom. 1595, the Duchess's Range Rover, logged out for an unscheduled errand, returned at 1620, driver M. Holt, passenger, none listed. The guard scanned both documents, aligning the timestamps. The Princess was in the garden during that window. According to the duty log, yes, but... Marsh hesitated. I wasn't in the garden the entire time. I was doing a perimeter sweep, standard protocol. I checked the garden at 1540 and again at 1615. Both times the Princess was there, but the 30-minute gap in between, I can't confirm continuous visual. Calloway was with her. Calloway logged it. That doesn't mean she didn't step away. The guard felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. You think the Princess was taken during that gap? I think it's possible. The timing aligns, the vehicle moved, the ribbon was found, and no one logged a child passenger. Why wouldn't Calloway report it? Maybe she didn't know. Maybe the Princess was collected by someone she trusted. Maybe it was framed as a quick, informal trip, 5 minutes, no detail needed, no fuss. That's a violation. It's also something that happens more often than you think. Senior royals bend protocol when it suits them. Usually it's harmless, a quick detour, an unscheduled stop, but it's still a breach, and if something went wrong during one of those detours, we'd never know until it was too late. The guard reread the logs. Holt drove. He'd have to know if there was a passenger, unless he was told not to log it. By who? Marsh met his eyes. Who do you think? The guard didn't answer. The implication was clear. Marsh folded the papers and put them back in her jacket. I can't take this further. If I file a query about the vehicle log, it'll get flagged immediately. Dryden will know it came from me, and, unlike you, I don't have the luxury of being reassigned quietly. I have 15 years in service and a pension to protect. Fair. She walked away without another word. The guard remained seated, watching the canteen slowly fill with morning staff. He had crossed a line. He knew it. Dryden had told him to move forward, and instead he had recruited another officer to help him dig deeper. But he also knew that the ribbon had not transferred by accident, and somewhere in the palace someone knew exactly how it had gotten into that car. The guard spent the next 2 days on standard rotation, perimeter checks, corridor duty, and one overnight shift monitoring the service entrance during a private family gathering. He did not see Officer Marsh. He did not receive any messages. His report remained filed but inactive, and Captain Dryden did not summon him again. On the third morning, at 06:30, his phone vibrated. Loading bay, 0700, bring coffee. The message was from Marsh. The guard dressed quickly, skipped breakfast, and stopped by the staff canteen long enough to pick up 2 paper cups. He walked to the loading bay through the service corridors, avoiding the main routes where cameras tracked movement more closely. The loading bay was a wide concrete platform used for deliveries and equipment transfers. At this hour, it was empty, except for a single panel van parked near the ramp. Officer Marsh stood beside it, her back to the wall, her arms folded. The guard approached and handed her one of the cups. "Thanks." She took a sip without looking at him. They stood in silence for a moment, both watching the empty driveway beyond the gate. I pulled the logs. Thursday afternoon, the Princess's schedule shows continuous supervision from 1400 to 1830. No gaps, no deviations. You're certain? I'm certain of what's written, but there's a problem. The guard waited. Marsh pulled a folded paper from her jacket and handed it to him. It was a printed copy of the duty log, marked with timestamps and initials. She pointed to a section halfway down the page. Here, 1540 to 1610. That's logged as garden play, supervised by Nanny Calloway. My initials are here because I was on perimeter, but look at the secondary log. She unfolded a second sheet, a vehicle movement log from the motor pool. She pointed to an entry near the bottom. 1595, the Duchess's Range Rover, logged out for an unscheduled errand, returned at 1620, driver M. Holt, passenger none listed. The guard scanned both documents, aligning the timestamps. The Princess was in the garden during that window. According to the duty log, yes, but Marsh hesitated. I wasn't in the garden the entire time. I was doing a perimeter sweep, standard protocol. I checked the garden at 1540 and again at 1615. Both times the Princess was there, but the 30-minute gap in between, I can't confirm continuous visual. Calloway was with her. Calloway logged it. That doesn't mean she didn't step away. The guard felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. You think the Princess was taken during that gap? I think it's possible. The timing aligns, the vehicle moved, the ribbon was found, and no one logged a child passenger. Why wouldn't Calloway?
I am not alleging wrongdoing. I am seeking clarification on whether this matter warrants secondary review under safeguarding protocol or whether the existing resolution is considered sufficient. I have attached relevant documentation and am available to provide further detail at your discretion. Respectfully. He attached the photographs, the duty log excerpt, and the vehicle log entry. Then he read the message one final time. It was careful. It was professional. It did not accuse. It did not assume. It simply presented facts and asked a question. He clicked send before he could second-guess himself. The reply came 4 hours later. Your inquiry has been received and is under review. You will be contacted within 48 hours to arrange a confidential briefing. Do not discuss this matter with anyone in the interim. The guard exhaled slowly and closed the laptop. He had escalated outside the chain of command. He had bypassed Dryden, bypassed the private secretary's office, and gone directly to the prince's household. There was no going back now. For the next 2 days, the guard maintained his rotation without incident. He did not see Captain Dryden. He did not receive any summons or reprimands. Officer Marsh passed him once in the corridor and said nothing, but her eyes held a question he did not answer. On the third morning, at 0900, his phone vibrated. Report to the blue drawing room, 10 o'clock, civilian attire. The message was unsigned, but the room designation told him everything he needed to know.
The blue drawing room was used for private briefings involving senior royals or their direct representatives. It was not a disciplinary space, it was a decision-making space. At 09:45, the guard changed into a dark suit and walked to the state apartments. He was met at the entrance by a senior aide, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and a calm, assessing expression. "This way." She led him through a series of corridors to a smaller antechamber outside the blue drawing room. Another man was already seated there, late 40s, greying beard, wearing a suit but no tie. He stood when the guard entered. Edward Marsh, private secretary to the Prince of Wales. The guard shook his hand. "Sir." "Sit." They sat across from each other in upholstered chairs. The aide remained standing near the door. Marsh opened a tablet and swiped through several screens. "I've reviewed your submission. I've also reviewed the original incident report filed with Captain Dryden, the closure memo from the private secretary's office, and the duty logs you referenced." He looked up. "You've put yourself in a difficult position." The guard said nothing. "You escalated outside your chain of command. You involved another officer. You questioned a resolution issued by the senior administrative office. In most cases, that would result in immediate reassignment and a formal reprimand." "Yes, sir." "But," Marsh set the tablet down, "you also identified a legitimate discrepancy that was not adequately addressed in the initial review. The vehicle movement you referenced, 15:55 to 16:20, was logged as an errand, but no destination was recorded, no passenger was listed, and the driver, when questioned this morning, confirmed that he was instructed to transport the princess on a brief informal visit." The guard's pulse quickened. "Where?" "To a private residence, approximately 15 minutes from Kensington. The Duchess requested the transport. The princess was collected from the garden, accompanied by Nanny Calloway, and returned within the logged time frame. Calloway was told it was a spontaneous visit and that formal logging was unnecessary given the short duration." "That's a protocol breach." "It is, but it's also consistent with informal practices that occur regularly within senior royal households. The Duchess has discretion over certain family movements, and staff are often instructed to prioritize privacy over procedural documentation, even when it involves a child." The guard's expression remained neutral. "Even then." The guard felt anger rising but kept his voice level. "The princess's detail wasn't informed. Officer Marsh had no knowledge of the movement. If something had happened during that transport, no one would have known where she was." "That is correct, and that is why this briefing is happening." Marsh leaned forward slightly. "The prince has been made aware of the incident. He was not pleased. The Duchess's discretion, while technically within her authority, created a safeguarding gap that could have resulted in harm. Steps are being taken to address that gap." "What steps?" "That's not your concern. Your concern is whether you followed protocol appropriately, and the determination is that you did, eventually. Your initial report was correct. Your escalation, while irregular, was justified. You will not face disciplinary action." The guard felt a small measure of relief, but it was overshadowed by the larger question. "And the princess?" "The princess is safe. Her detail has been briefed. Protocols are being tightened. The Duchess has been advised that future transports involving the children will require full logging and coordination with protection staff." "Advised?" Marsh's eyes sharpened. "She is the Queen Consort. She will not be reprimanded publicly, but she has been made aware that her discretion does not extend to circumventing safeguarding measures. The message has been delivered clearly." "Who?" "By the prince." The guard absorbed this. The confrontation he had been anticipating, the direct challenge to authority, had already happened, not by him, but by someone with standing to make it matter. "What happens now?" "You return to duty. You do not discuss this matter with anyone. The incident is closed." "And if it happens again?" Marsh stood. Then you report it, same as you did this time, but understand that every escalation carries risk. You were right this time, you may not be next time, and the institutional tolerance for repeated challenges is limited. The guard stood as well. Understood. Marsh extended his hand again. You did your job. That's worth something. They shook, and the guard left the room. As he walked back through the corridors, he felt the weight of what had just happened settle over him. He had been vindicated, he had been protected, but he had also been warned. The system had bent, but it had not broken, and the Duchess, despite being confronted, had not been held accountable in any way that mattered. The guard returned to his quarters and sat on the edge of his bunk. His phone buzzed. A message from Officer Marsh. Heard you're still standing. Good. He typed a reply. Protocols are being tightened. Her response came quickly. For now. The guard stared at the screen, then set the phone down. She was right. Protocols could be tightened, advisories could be issued, but unless the underlying authority structure changed, the same discretion that had allowed the Duchess to move the princess without logging would allow her to do it again, and next time there might not be a ribbon left behind. The guard's next shift began at 1400, assigned to the East Terrace during the princess's afternoon activities. The day was overcast, the air cool enough that staff wore jackets. The princess was scheduled for outdoor play from 1430 to 1600, supervised by Officer Marsh and Nanny Calloway. The guard took his position near the terrace steps, maintaining a clear sightline to the garden below. At 1428, the princess emerged from the residence, holding Calloway's hand. She wore a pink jacket and white trainers, her hair tied back with the green ribbon Officer Marsh had mentioned. Officer Marsh followed a few steps behind, her posture alert but relaxed. She did not acknowledge the guard, but she saw her glance briefly in her direction. The princess ran ahead to the swing set, and Calloway followed at a measured pace. Officer Marsh adjusted her position to maintain visual contact. The guard remained still, but he noted the interaction. The princess had initiated the movement. Calloway had followed. That was consistent with supervised play, but it was also the kind of moment that could be exploited. A child's request, a trusted adult's compliance, a brief deviation that no one questioned. At 1525, the princess and Calloway emerged from the greenhouse and returned to the main garden. The princess carried a small watering can and began tending to a row of potted plants near the terrace wall. Officer Marsh approached the guard, her voice low. She's more restless than usual. Since when? Since Thursday. The guard glanced at her. Has she said anything? Not to me, but Calloway mentioned she's been asking questions. What kind of questions? Where people are, why schedules change, whether she is allowed to go places without telling anyone. The guard felt a tightness in his chest. That's not normal for her. She's 7, she asks questions about everything, but these are different, more careful, like she's testing what she's allowed to say.
The guard said nothing, but the implication was clear. The princess knew something. She had experienced something, and she was trying to understand whether it was allowed. At 1550, Calloway signaled that playtime was ending. The princess set down the watering can and walked back toward the residence, waving at Officer Marsh as she passed. Marsh waved back, then waited until the princess was inside before approaching the guard again. I spoke to Calloway last night, off the record. She confirmed that the princess was collected from the garden Thursday afternoon. She said it was framed as a quick visit, informal, family matter, nothing to log. Calloway was told to accompany her, but not to inform the detail. Who told her? The Duchess's personal aide. And she complied. She's been with the family for 12 years. She's not going to question a direct instruction from senior staff. The guard exhaled slowly. So the princess was taken. Calloway went with her, and no one logged it because it was presented as routine. Exactly. Where did they go? Calloway wouldn't say.
She was nervous even talking to me, but she did mention that the princess seemed confused. She kept asking why they were leaving and whether her father knew. The guard felt his jaw tighten. And what did Calloway tell her? That it was fine, that it was just a short trip, that she'd be back before anyone noticed. But she wasn't fine with it. Ma shook her head. No, she wasn't, but she didn't know how to refuse. The guard looked toward the residence where the princess had disappeared through the doorway. Can we speak to her? The princess? Marsh's expression darkened. You want to question a 7-year-old? I want to confirm what happened. If she was moved without proper authorization, she's the only one who can tell us why. She's a child. She doesn't understand authorization. She'll tell us what she remembers, and we'll have to interpret it through the lens of adult conflict. That's not fair to her. Neither is being moved around without her detail knowing. Marsh was silent for a moment. Then she sighed. If we do this, it has to be sanctioned. We can't just pull her aside and start asking questions. It has to go through the prince's office. Can you arrange that? I can try, but it'll take time. And if the Duchess finds out we're questioning her movements through her stepdaughter, this gets a lot more complicated. It's already complicated. Marsh gave him a sharp look. You're sure you want to do this? Because once we involve the princess directly, there's no walking it back. Her testimony becomes part of the record, and if that record contradicts the Duchess's account, you're not just challenging protocol, you're challenging her credibility. The guard met her eyes. Then we'd better make sure we do it right. 2 days later, at 10 o'clock, the guard was summoned to a private meeting room in the residential wing. He arrived to find Officer Marsh, Nanny Calloway, and a woman he didn't recognize, mid-50s, dark suit, silver-rimmed glasses. She introduced herself as Dr. Helen Cartwright, a child psychologist retained by the prince's household. Please, sit. The guard sat across from her. Officer Marsh and Calloway took seats along the side wall. You've requested permission to speak with the princess regarding an incident last Thursday. I've reviewed the context. I understand the concern. But before we proceed, I need to establish some ground rules. Of course. First, this is not an interrogation. It's a conversation. The princess will not be pressured, led, or made to feel that she's in trouble. Second, I will be present for the entire conversation. At any point I determine that the questioning is inappropriate or distressing, I will end it immediately. Third, the princess's account will be documented, but it will not be used punitively against any adult without corroborating evidence. Are we clear? Yes. Good. Officer Marsh has provided a summary of the timeline and the discrepancy in the logs. What specifically do you need to confirm? The guard chose his words carefully. Whether the princess was transported off-site Thursday afternoon, whether she understood where she was going and why, and whether she felt safe during that transport. Dr. Cartwright nodded. Those are reasonable questions. I'll facilitate the conversation, but I'll be framing it in age-appropriate language. You'll observe, but you won't speak unless I invite you to. Understood? Understood. Dr. Cartwright stood. Wait here. She left the room. Officer Marsh glanced at the guard but said nothing. Calloway sat with her hands folded, her expression tense. 5 minutes later, Dr. Cartwright returned with the princess. The child wore a blue dress and white shoes, her hair down. She looked around the room with curiosity but no apparent fear. Hello, sweetheart. These are some people who help keep you safe. They'd like to talk to you for a few minutes. Is that all right? The princess nodded. Dr. Cartwright guided her to a chair and sat beside her. Do you remember last Thursday? You were playing in the garden in the afternoon. The princess nodded again, with the watering can. That's right. Do you remember if anything else happened that afternoon? Did you go anywhere besides the garden? The princess hesitated, glancing at Calloway. Calloway gave her an encouraging smile. "I went to see Camilla." Dr. Cartwright's tone remained gentle. "You went to see the Duchess?" "Yes." "How did you get there?" "In the car. Nanny came with me." "Do you remember why you went to see her?" The princess frowned slightly, as if trying to recall. "She said she wanted to show me something, a surprise." "Did you want to go?" The princess shrugged. "I don't know. Nanny said it was okay." Dr. Cartwright glanced at Calloway, then back to the princess. "When you got there, what happened?" "We went inside. She showed me some pictures, old pictures when Papa was little." "Did you like them?" "They were okay, but I wanted to go back to the garden." "Did you tell her that?" The princess nodded. "She said we had to stay a little longer, but then Nanny said we should go, and we went back." "Did anyone else know you were going to see Camilla?" The princess looked uncertain. "I don't know. Nanny knew." "Did your papa know?" The princess shook her head. "I don't think so." Dr. Cartwright paused, then asked softly, "Did you feel safe while you were there?" The princess thought about this. "I guess so, but I didn't like leaving without telling anyone. Nanny said it was a secret." "A secret?" "Not a bad secret, just that we didn't have to tell everyone where we went." Dr. Cartwright glanced at the guard, then back to the princess. "Thank you for telling me, sweetheart. You've been very helpful. Is there anything else you want to tell me about that day?" The princess hesitated, then said quietly, "I lost my ribbon, the blue one. I thought I left it in the garden, but it wasn't there." "Did you ever find it?" "Nanny said someone found it and put it back in my room, but I don't know where it went." Dr. Cartwright smiled. "That's all right. Sometimes things get lost and then found again. You did a great job talking to me today." She stood and walked the princess to the door, where a staff member was waiting to escort her back to the residence. The princess left without looking back. Dr. Cartwright returned to her seat and folded her hands. "Well?" The guard leaned forward. She confirmed she was taken off-site. She confirmed Calloway was with her. She confirmed it wasn't logged because it was framed as a secret. She also confirmed that she felt safe and that the visit was brief. There's no indication of harm or distress. But there is an indication of protocol violation. She was moved without her details knowledge. She was told it was a secret, and she lost a personal item during the transport, which suggests the trip was improvised, not planned. Dr. Cartwright regarded him carefully. "You're not wrong, but from a safeguarding point of view, the critical question is whether the child was at risk, and based on her account, she wasn't. She was with a trusted adult in a familiar setting for a short duration. The protocol violation is administrative, not protective. Administrative breaches create protective risks. They can, but they don't always." Officer Marsh spoke up. "With respect, Doctor, the issue isn't just whether she was safe this time, it's whether this kind of informal, unlogged transport becomes a pattern. Because if it does, eventually someone with bad intentions will exploit it." Dr. Cartwright nodded slowly. "That's a fair point, and I'll include that concern in my report. But the princess's testimony alone won't change policy. That requires action from the principals." The guard stood. "Then we make sure the principals have the full picture." Dr. Cartwright studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I'll forward my findings to the prince's office. What you do with that information is your decision." The guard left the room with Officer Marsh. They walked in silence until they reached the corridor junction. She was scared. "The princess?" "No, Calloway. Did you see her face when the princess said it?"
Report to Archives Room C, 0800 hours tomorrow. Bring all documentation. The guard read the message twice, then began gathering materials. He copied the photographs from his phone to a secure folder on his laptop, printed the vehicle and duty logs that Officer Marsh had provided, and compiled a written summary of the timeline, cross-referencing each piece of evidence with timestamps and witness accounts. By midnight, he had assembled a file 23 pages long. He sealed it in an envelope, labeled it with his service number, and locked it in his personal storage locker. At 07:45 the next morning, he walked to the archives room, a secure, windowless space in the lower level of the administrative wing, used for sensitive briefings and evidence review. A keycard reader was mounted beside the door. The guard swiped his ID and waited. The door unlocked. He entered. The room was small, lit by overhead fluorescence, with a single table and 4 chairs. Edward Marsh was already seated, a laptop open in front of him. Beside him sat a man the guard didn't recognize, late 30s, wearing a dark suit, no insignia or identification visible. "Close the door." The guard did, then took a seat across from them. Marsh gestured to the second man. "This is Mr. Callahan. He's with the Royalty and Specialist Protection Command. He's here to assess whether this matter requires formal investigation beyond internal review." Callahan nodded, but did not offer his hand. His expression was neutral, assessing. Marsh continued, "You've compiled evidence regarding an unlogged transport of the princess. I've reviewed Dr. Cartwright's report. I've also spoken with Nanny Calloway and Officer Marsh. What I need from you now is a complete presentation of your findings in chronological order with supporting documentation." The guard opened his envelope and spread the contents across the table, the photographs, the logs, the written summary. He began with the discovery of the ribbon, walked through the timeline discrepancies, detailed his escalation attempts, and concluded with the princess's testimony. He spoke for 12 minutes without interruption. When he finished, Callahan leaned forward and picked up one of the photographs, the image of the ribbon beneath the seat. "This was taken at 23:29 on the day in question." "Yes." "And you did not touch or move the item." "Correct." "Why not?" "Because I recognized it as potential evidence of a safeguarding breach. I documented it in place to preserve context." Callahan set the photo down. "You suspected a breach before you had any evidence of one." "I suspected an anomaly. The breach became apparent after I reviewed the logs." Callahan exchanged a glance with Marsh, then continued. "The ribbon was subsequently removed during vehicle servicing. Do you know where it is now?" "It was returned to the princess's household, according to Captain Dryden." "Do you have confirmation of that?" "No." Callahan made a note on his laptop. "So the physical evidence no longer exists in a verifiable chain of custody. The photographs exist, the testimony exists, the timeline exists. Photographs can be questioned, testimony from a 7-year-old can be questioned, timelines can be explained as clerical errors." Callahan's tone was not hostile, but it was blunt. "What you have here is a circumstantial case built on secondary evidence. That's not enough to pursue formal charges." The guard felt his frustration rising. "I'm not asking for charges. I'm asking for accountability. A child was moved without authorization. That's a violation of safeguarding protocol." "It's a violation of procedural protocol. Safeguarding protocol is designed to prevent harm. The child was not harmed. She was with a trusted adult. She was returned safely. The visit, while unlogged, was not dangerous. It created a dangerous precedent. Precedent isn't evidence." The guard looked at Marsh. "Is this how the prince's office sees it?" Marsh closed his laptop slowly. "The prince sees it as a serious lapse in judgment. The Duchess was made aware that her discretion does not extend to circumventing protection protocols. But Mr. Callahan is correct. Without physical evidence or proof of harm, there's no basis for formal investigation." "What about the previous incident, 3 months ago, the staff member who reported seeing the princess near Windsor?"
Callahan's expression sharpened. "Where did you hear about that?" "It's not classified. It was resolved internally. The staff member misidentified the child. The incident was closed. Or the staff member was reassigned to silence the inquiry." Callahan leant back, his gaze hardening. "You're making accusations without proof. I'm identifying a pattern. Patterns require multiple confirmed incidents. You have one incident with circumstantial evidence and a closed matter that you're reinterpreting to fit your narrative." The guard forced himself to stay calm. Then what would constitute proof? Callahan folded his arms. A repeat incident, documented in real time with multiple witnesses and evidence of intent to deceive or endanger, by which point the child could be at risk. Risk assessment is our job, not yours. The guard looked at Marsh. "Is that the final word?" Marsh hesitated, then spoke carefully. "The prince has instructed that all future transports involving the children must be logged and coordinated with their protection details. No exceptions. The Duchess has been informed. Nanny Calloway has been reminded of her duty to report any deviation. Officer Marsh has been authorized to escalate directly to my office if she observes any further irregularities. And if the Duchess ignores the instruction, then we'll address it at that time." The guard felt the weight of the statement. The system had adapted. Protocols had been tightened, but enforcement was still reactive, not proactive. "What about the ribbon? Can it be recovered and independently verified?" Callahan headed his head. "It's been returned to the household. It's no longer evidence. It's a personal item. Then we've lost the one piece of physical proof. You never had it. You had a photograph of an object that could have arrived in that vehicle through a dozen different means. That's not proof. It's a data point." The guard gathered his materials and placed them back in the envelope. He felt the conversation closing, the decision already made. "Is there anything else?" The guard stood. "No, sir." "Then you're dismissed. Your actions are noted as procedurally sound. You will not face reprimand, but you are advised to return to standard duties and refrain from further independent inquiry into this matter." The guard stood. Understood. He left the room, walked back through the corridor, and emerged into the daylight. The morning was bright, the air cold. He felt hollowed out, the adrenaline of the briefing fading into exhaustion. He had done everything right. He had documented, he had escalated, he had testified, and the system had absorbed it all, acknowledged the problem, issued new guidelines, and moved on. The Duchess had been advised, protocols had been tightened, the ribbon had been returned, but no one had been held accountable. The guard returned to quarters and sat on his bunk, staring at the envelope in his hands. He had 23 pages of evidence, photographs, testimony, and timeline analysis, all of it accurate, all of it procedurally sound, all of it insufficient. He thought about Officer Marsh's warning. This isn't the first time. He thought about the princess's quiet voice. Nanny said it was a secret. He thought about Callahan's cold assessment. Patterns require multiple confirmed incidents. They were waiting for it to happen again. The guard opened his phone and navigated to his contacts. He found Officer Marsh's number and sent a message. Did they recover the ribbon? Her reply came 3 minutes later. "No, it was logged as returned, but I checked the princess's wardrobe inventory. It's not there." The guard stared at the screen. "Where is it?" "I don't know, but I'm guessing it was destroyed." "By who? Who do you think?" The guard set the phone down and exhaled slowly. The ribbon had been the only physical evidence, and now it was gone. He opened his laptop and accessed the internal directory again. He navigated to the vehicle service records, searching for the report on the Duchess's Range Rover. The file was marked restricted, accessible only to senior logistics staff. He tried his credentials anyway. Access denied. He closed the laptop. There was nothing more he could do through official channels. The evidence had been reviewed, the findings had been delivered, the system had responded with new guidelines and warnings. But the ribbon was gone, the previous incident had been buried, and the Duchess remained untouchable. The guard stood and walked to the window. Outside, the palace grounds stretched in manicured perfection, the paths empty, the gardens still. He thought about what Edward Marsh had said.
The guard stared at the question. He could have said it was duty. He could have said it was principle. But the truth was simpler. Because no one else will. Marsh's reply was brief. "All right, I'm in." The guard set the phone down and returned to the window. He had crossed another line. He had created a parallel monitoring system outside official channels. If discovered, it would end his career. But if it prevented another incident, if it gave him the proof Callahan demanded, it would be worth it. He stood there for a long time, watching the grounds, waiting. 3 weeks passed without incident. The princess maintained her schedule. Officer Marsh reported no deviations. The Duchess attended public engagements and private functions, all logged and coordinated. The guard began to think that maybe the warnings had worked. Maybe the system, for all its flaws, had corrected itself. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon, his phone vibrated. "Motor pool. Now." The message was from Officer Marsh. The guard left his post and walked quickly to the loading bay. Marsh was waiting near the service entrance, her expression tight. "What happened?" "The Duchess's car. It's gone." "Gone?" "Logged out 20 minutes ago. Driver, Holt. Passenger, none listed, but I saw the princess near the motor pool 10 minutes before it left." The guard felt his pulse spike. "Where's Calloway?" "She's listed as on break, 30-minute window. The princess was supposed to be in her room during that time." "Who has eyes on her now?" "No one. She's not in her room. I checked." The guard pulled out his phone and opened the vehicle tracking app linked to the security network. He entered the Range Rover's ID. The vehicle was moving south, toward Windsor. He showed Marsh the screen. "We need to report this." "To who?" "Dryden will tell us to wait for the vehicle to return. Callahan will say it's another informal trip." "Then what do we do?" The guards stared at the map. The vehicle was 15 minutes away. If they moved now, they could intercept it. They could confirm whether the princess was inside. They could document it in real time. "We follow." Marsh's eyes widened. "That's not authorized." Neither was taking her off-site without logging it. She hesitated, then nodded. "My car. Let's go." They left the palace grounds through the staff exit and drove south, following the tracking signal. The guard kept his phone open, watching the Range Rover's position update every 30 seconds. At 16:42, the vehicle stopped. The guard zoomed in on the map. The location was a private estate, approximately 12 miles from Windsor. No public access, no official designation. "Whose property is that?" The guard ran a search on the address. The result came back quickly. "Registered owner, Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall." Marsh exhaled sharply. "Her private residence." "Which means the princess is there, unlogged, unsupervised by her detail. And we have no authority to enter." The guards stared at the screen. They had the location, they had the timeline, but without direct visual confirmation, it was still circumstantial. "We wait. We document when the vehicle leaves. We confirm whether the princess is inside when it returns." Marsh nodded and parked along the roadside, 50 meters from the estate entrance. They waited in silence, watching the gate. At 17:18, the Range Rover emerged and turned back toward the palace. The guard photographed the vehicle as it passed, capturing the license plate, the timestamp, and the direction of travel. Then he called Edward Marsh. "We have a second incident, documented in real time. The princess was transported off-site without authorization. I have the location, the vehicle ID, and photographic evidence." There was a long pause. "Where are you?" "En route back to the palace." "Report to my office immediately upon arrival." The call ended.
The guard looked at Officer Marsh. "This is it. This is the proof Callahan demanded." She nodded, but her expression was wary. "Let's hope it's enough." The guard arrived back at the palace at 7:55. They entered through the staff entrance and walked directly to the administrative wing. Edward Marsh's office was open. He was standing behind his desk, arms folded, his expression unreadable. Inside. They entered. Marsh closed the door. "Sit." They sat. The guard placed his phone on the desk, screen facing up, the photograph of the Range Rover visible. Marsh leaned forward. "Explain." The guard recounted the sequence. Officer Marsh's alert, the vehicle log showing no passenger, the princess missing from her scheduled location, the tracking data showing movement to the Duchess's private estate, and the photographic confirmation of the vehicle's return. He spoke for 4 minutes. Marsh did not interrupt. When the guard finished, Marsh picked up the phone and studied the photograph. Then he set it down and looked at Officer Marsh. "You confirmed the princess was not in her room." "Yes, sir. I checked personally. She was scheduled to be there during Calloway's break. She wasn't." "And Calloway?" "Still on break when the vehicle left. She returned at 1700. I didn't confront her." Marsh nodded slowly. He opened his laptop and began typing. "The vehicle is scheduled to return to the motor pool at 8:10 p.m. I'm instructing security to document all passengers upon arrival. If the princess is inside, we'll have confirmation. And if she's not, then she's still missing and we escalate to emergency protocol." Marsh picked up his desk phone and dialed. "This is Marsh. I need immediate confirmation of all passengers in vehicle Romeo 7 upon arrival. Yes, non-negotiable. I'll hold." He waited, the phone pressed to his ear. The guard and Officer Marsh sat in silence. 2 minutes later, Marsh's expression changed. He listened, said, "Understood," and hung up. He looked at them. The princess was inside. She's being escorted back to the residence now. The guard felt a surge of vindication. Then we have confirmation. She was transported off-site without authorization, again. Marsh leaned back in his chair. "Yes, we do." "What happens now?" Marsh was silent for a long moment. Then he stood. "Now I brief the prince." He walked to the door, then paused and looked back. "You two stay here. Do not leave this office. Do not speak to anyone. If anyone asks where you are, you're in a meeting. Clear?" "Clear." Marsh left. Officer Marsh exhaled slowly and looked at the guard. "We just triggered something big." "Good." "Is it? Because if this goes sideways, we're the ones who'll take the fall." "It won't go sideways. We have the proof. We followed protocol. We documented everything. We also followed the Duchess without authorization. We tracked her vehicle without clearance. If she frames this as surveillance or harassment, we're finished." The guard considered this. She was right. They had acted outside their authority, but they had also done the only thing that would produce evidence Callahan and the system would accept. Then we'd better hope the prince sees it the same way we do. They waited. At 18:35, Edward Marsh returned. His expression was tight, controlled. He closed the door behind him and sat down. "The prince wants a full briefing. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. You will both be present. You will bring all documentation, all evidence, and you will be prepared to answer every question he has." The guard nodded. "Understood." "This is not a formal inquiry. This is a private briefing. What is said in that room stays in that room. The prince will determine next steps based on what he hears. If he decides to escalate, it will go to the private secretary's office and potentially to Royalty Protection Command. If he decides not to escalate, this matter ends here. Are we clear?" "Clear." Marsh's gaze hardened. "And if you've fabricated anything, if any part of your account is exaggerated or false, you will be dismissed immediately and face possible legal action. The stakes here are not procedural. They are reputational, institutional, and personal. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Dismissed." They left the office and walked in silence back to the staff quarters. When they were alone in the corridor, Officer Marsh stopped. "Are you ready for this?" "I don't know, but it's happening whether I'm ready or not." She nodded. Then we'd better make sure we tell it right. The guard spent the evening reviewing every piece of evidence. He reread the logs, double-checked the timestamps, verified the photographic metadata. He compiled a written statement, organized chronologically, with each claim supported by documentation. By midnight, he had a file 31 pages long. He did not sleep well. He lay in his bunk, replaying the briefing in his mind, anticipating questions, preparing answers. He thought about the princess, about the ribbon, about the pattern of informal, unlogged transports that no one seemed willing to confront. At 7 a.m., he rose, dressed in his formal uniform, and walked to the staff canteen. Officer Marsh was already there, sitting alone near the window, a cup of tea untouched in front of her. He sat across from her. "Are you ready?" "No, but I'm here." They ate in silence, then walked together to the state apartments. At 8:50, they were escorted to a private study on the second floor, a room the guard had never entered before. It was smaller than he expected, lined with bookshelves, a single desk near the window. Edward Marsh was already seated. Beside him sat Mr. Callahan, the royalty protection officer from the previous briefing. And at the head of the table sat Prince William. The guard and Officer Marsh stood at attention. "Sit." They sat.
William's gaze shifted back to the guard. "You tracked the Duchess's vehicle without authorization." "Yes, sir." "You followed it off palace grounds." "Yes, sir." "You photographed it." "Yes, sir." William leaned back. "You understand that what you did could be framed as surveillance, as overreach, as insubordination." "I understand, sir." "Then why did you do it?" The guard met his eyes. "Because your daughter was moved without your knowledge, because it's happened before, and because no one else was willing to document it." William was silent for a long moment. Then he looked at Callahan. "Your assessment?" Callahan opened his laptop and pulled up a file. "The evidence is consistent with a second unlogged transport. The princess was confirmed to be in the vehicle. The destination matches the Duchess's private residence. The timeline aligns with the duty log gap. Is it actionable?" Callahan paused. "That depends on what you want to action. If the goal is to enforce protocol, then yes. If the goal is formal investigation, we'd need testimony from the driver and confirmation of intent." "Intent?" "Whether the Duchess knowingly circumvented safeguarding protocol, or whether she believed she was operating within her discretionary authority." William's jaw tightened. "She was told explicitly after the first incident that all transports involving the children must be logged. Then this constitutes a direct violation." William turned to Edward Marsh. "What does the private secretary's office recommend?" Marsh chose his words carefully. "They recommend a private resolution, a direct conversation between you and the Duchess, no formal inquiry, no public record. And if she does it again, then the matter escalates." William's expression darkened. "So we wait for a third incident?" "That's the institutional recommendation, yes." William stood abruptly and walked to the window. He stared out at the grounds, his hands clasped behind his back. The room was silent. After a long moment, William turned back. "I want to be clear about something. My daughter is 7 years old. She is not a bargaining chip. She is not a procedural inconvenience. She is a child under my care, and I will not tolerate anyone, regardless of their position, treating her safety as optional." He looked at the guard. "You did the right thing, both of you. You followed your instincts, you documented what you saw, you brought it to the appropriate authority. That took courage, and I'm grateful." The guard felt a tightness in his chest ease slightly. William continued, "But I also need you to understand that what happens next is not in your hands. This is a family matter. It's also a constitutional matter. The Duchess holds a senior position. Any action taken against her has implications beyond protocol." "I understand, sir." "Do you? Because if I confront her and she denies it, and this becomes a he said, she said, your careers will be collateral damage.
The institution will protect itself, not you." The guard nodded slowly. "I understand, sir. And you're still willing to move forward?" "Yes, sir." William looked at Officer Marsh. "And you?" "Yes, sir." William returned to his seat. "Then here's what's going to happen. I will speak to the Duchess, privately. I will present the evidence. I will make it clear that this behavior ends now. If she cooperates, the matter stays internal. If she doesn't, I escalate to the king." He looked at Callahan. "I want the driver questioned. I want confirmation of every transport involving my daughter for the past 6 months, and I want a full audit of the Duchess's vehicle logs." Callahan nodded. "Understood." William turned back to the guard. "You're not to discuss this with anyone, not Dryden, not your fellow officers, no one. If this leaks, the narrative will be controlled by people who don't care about the truth. Clear?" "Clear, sir." "Good. You're dismissed." The guard and Officer Marsh stood, saluted, and left the room. As they walked back through the corridor, Officer Marsh exhaled sharply. "He's actually going to confront her. He has to. We gave him no choice. Let's hope she doesn't have more pull than we think." The guard said nothing. He had done what he could. The rest was out of his hands. But for the first time since finding the ribbon, he felt like someone in authority was finally listening. The guard returned to duty the following morning, assigned to routine corridor patrol. He received no updates from Edward Marsh, no summons, no messages. The day passed in silence, the palace functioning as it always did, calm, ordered, insulated from the tension building beneath its surface. At 1600 hours, as the guard completed his shift and logged off, his phone buzzed. "It's done." The message was from Edward Marsh. No details, no context, just 2 words. The guard stared at the screen, then pocketed the phone and walked back to quarters. He wanted to know what had been said, what had been decided, whether the Duchess had admitted anything or denied everything. But he also understood that he might never know. Private conversations between senior royals were exactly that, private. He would have to wait. 3 days later, at 1100, the guard was summoned to Captain Dryden's office. He arrived to find Dryden seated behind his desk, his expression unreadable. "Sit." The guard sat. Dryden folded his hands. "You've been reassigned." "To where?" "Perimeter security, effective immediately. You'll report to the outer gate detail starting Monday." "That's a demotion." "It's a lateral transfer. It's a removal from proximity to the family." Dryden's eyes narrowed. "It's a transfer that ensures you're no longer in a position to create conflicts of interest. You escalated a sensitive matter. You pursued it aggressively. You produced results. But you also made it impossible for you to continue in close protection without becoming a focal point every time the Duchess is in the building." The guard leaned back. "So I'm being punished for being right. You're being reassigned because the situation requires distance. This is not punitive, it's practical." "And Officer Marsh?" "Officer Marsh remains on the princess's detail. She has seniority and demonstrated sound judgment, but she's also been counseled to follow the chain of command." The guard felt anger rising, but forced himself to stay calm. "What about the Duchess? What's her consequence?" Dryden's expression hardened. "That's not your concern." "It is if she's still moving the princess around without logging it." "She's not." Dryden leaned forward. "The Duchess was confronted by the prince. She admitted to the transports. She claimed they were informal family visits, brief, harmless, and within her discretionary authority as stepmother. The prince made it clear that discretion does not override safeguarding protocol. She's agreed to full compliance moving forward. And if she doesn't, then it will be addressed at that time. But for now, the matter is resolved." The guard stared at him. "So she admits to violating protocol, and her consequence is a warning. Her consequence is a direct reprimand from the future king. That carries weight. Not enough weight to prevent her from doing it again." Dryden's jaw tightened. "You're out of line. I'm stating facts. You're stating opinions. And your opinion is no longer relevant to this matter." Dryden stood. "You did your job. You reported a concern. You escalated appropriately. But now the decision-makers have made their decisions, and your role is over. You return to duty, you accept your reassignment, and you move on." The guard stood as well. "And if the princess is put at risk again, then Officer Marsh will report it, and it will be handled through the proper channels." The guard held Dryden's eyes for a moment, then turned and left the office. He walked back through the corridors, his mind churning. He had been vindicated. He had been proven right. He had forced the institution to act, and his reward was removal. At 1800 hours, he received another message, this one from Officer Marsh. "Heard about the transfer. I'm sorry." He replied, "Not your fault. Still feels like it. What's the situation with the princess? Protocols have been tightened, all movements logged, no exceptions. Calloway has been reminded of her reporting duties. The Duchess hasn't been near her since the confrontation. Good. Is it? Because it feels like we won the battle and lost the war." The guard stared at the message. She was right. The immediate threat had been addressed, but the underlying power structure remained unchanged. The Duchess was reprimanded, not removed. Her authority had been checked, not revoked, and the guard had been pushed to the periphery, where he could no longer observe, no longer intervene, no longer protect. He typed a reply. "We did what we could." Did we? He didn't reply. 2 weeks passed. The guard adjusted to his new post at the outer gate, monitoring vehicle entries, checking credentials, coordinating with perimeter patrols. It was routine work, far removed from the inner workings of the palace. He saw the princess once, in the back of a vehicle passing through the gate on her way to a public engagement. She waved to the guard on duty, a young officer the guard didn't recognize. The princess looked happy, unburdened.
"Have you checked the vehicle logs?" "I can't. I don't have access anymore. Dryden restricted it after your transfer." The guard exhaled sharply. "So we have a statement from the princess, but no way to verify it. Not through official channels." The guard looked at her. "What are you suggesting?" Marsh hesitated. "I'm suggesting we go back to Edward Marsh. We present the princess's statement. We request a full audit of the Duchess's movements for the past 2 weeks. And if he says no, then we escalate to the prince directly." The guard considered this. It was risky. It would burn whatever goodwill they had left. But if the Duchess was still circumventing protocol, the princess was still at risk. "Do it, but don't mention me. If this comes back on someone, it should be you. You're still on the detail. You have standing." Marsh shook her head. "We're in this together." "No, you have a career to protect. I'm already reassigned. If this goes wrong, I'm expendable. You're not." She stared at him for a long moment. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." She nodded slowly. "All right, I'll contact Edward Marsh tonight." She stood and left. The guard remained seated, staring at the table. He had been removed from the situation. He had been told to move on, but the situation had followed him anyway. At 2000, Officer Marsh called. "Edward Marsh wants to see us both, tomorrow, 800. "Both?" He said if we're making another accusation, he wants to hear it from both of us. He wants to make sure we're aligned. "All right. Are you ready for this?" The guard thought about the princess, about the ribbon, about the pattern that kept repeating, no matter how many warnings were issued. "Yeah, I'm ready." The next morning, they met outside Edward Marsh's office. He was waiting for them, standing in the doorway, his expression grim. Inside, they entered. Marsh closed the door and gestured to the chairs. They sat. "Officer Marsh contacted me with a concern. She claims the princess made a statement suggesting ongoing, unlogged interactions with the Duchess. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "What exactly did the princess say?"
Officer Marsh recounted the conversation. Marsh listened without interrupting, then turned to the guard. "And you believe this constitutes another protocol breach?" "I believe it warrants investigation. The princess used plural phrasing. That suggests multiple incidents, not one." Marsh leaned back. "Or it suggests a child conflating past events with present ones. Children don't have perfect recall." "She's 7, not 3. She knows the difference between one visit and multiple visits." Marsh was silent for a moment. Then he opened his laptop and began typing. "I'll request the vehicle logs for the past 2 weeks. If there are unlogged movements, we'll find them. And if there aren't, then the princess is either misremembering or the interactions occurred on-site in a way that didn't require vehicle transport, which would still be a violation if they weren't logged." "Yes, but it would be harder to prove." Marsh looked up. "I need you both to understand something. The prince confronted the Duchess. He issued a direct order. If she violated that order, the consequences will be severe, but I need proof, not interpretation, not suspicion. Proof. We understand." "Good. I'll have the logs by end of day. If there's something there, we'll move forward. If not, this inquiry closes and you both return to your duties without further escalation. Agreed?" "Agreed." Marsh dismissed them. They walked back through the corridors in silence. Officer Marsh finally spoke. "What if there's nothing in the logs? Then we find another way." "There is no other way. We've used every channel we have." The guard stopped walking and looked at her. "There's always another way." At 1700, Edward Marsh called. "The logs are clean. No unlogged vehicle movements, no discrepancies." The guard felt the ground shift beneath him. "That's not possible." "It's documented fact. Every transport is logged. Every passenger is listed. The Duchess has been fully compliant." "Then the interactions happened on-site." "If they did, they were informal and within common areas. That's not a protocol violation." "It is if she's instructing the princess not to talk about them." Marsh's tone hardened. "That's an allegation of misconduct. Do you have evidence?" "We have the princess's statement." "That's not evidence. That's a child's comment filtered through an adult's interpretation." The guard felt his frustration boiling over. "So what do you need? A recording? A witness? What would actually qualify for proof?" "A pattern of documented behavior that demonstrates intent to deceive or endanger. Right now, you don't have that. You have suspicion. And by the time we have proof, it might be too late." Marsh exhaled slowly. "I understand your concern, but I can't act on suspicion. I need facts." The call ended. The guard stood alone in the corridor, the phone still in his hand. He had done everything right. He had followed every protocol. He had escalated through every channel. And he had hit a wall. But he also knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Duchess had not stopped. She'd just gotten better at hiding it. And if no one else was willing to confront her, he would have to find a way to force the issue himself. The guard spent the next week in a state of controlled frustration. He completed his shifts at the outer gate, maintained his professional demeanor, and avoided any conversation about the ongoing situation. But internally, he was calculating his next move. He couldn't access the logs. He couldn't monitor the princess directly. He couldn't escalate further without risking dismissal. But he could watch, and he could wait. On the 8th day, at 11 a.m., his phone buzzed. It was Officer Marsh. "The prince requested a meeting with the princess's full protection detail. I'm bringing your name up. If he approves, you'll be reinstated temporarily as a consultant." The guard felt a flicker of hope. "Why?" "Because he's not satisfied with the current protocols. He wants an independent review." "When?" "Tomorrow, 1400. Be ready." The next afternoon, the guard arrived at the state apartments and was escorted to a private conference room. Prince William was already seated at the head of the table. Edward Marsh sat to his right. Officer Marsh, Nanny Calloway, and Captain Dryden were also present. At the far end sat Mr. Callahan from Royalty Protection Command. William gestured for the guard to sit. "Thank you all for coming. I've called this meeting because I'm not convinced that the current safeguarding protocols are sufficient. Despite clear directives, there remain gaps that could be exploited. He looked at the guard. "You've been the most persistent voice raising these concerns. I want to hear in your own words what you believe is still broken." The guard glanced at Dryden, who gave a curt nod. Permission granted. The guard spoke carefully. "The system relies on voluntary compliance from senior royals. When someone with discretionary authority chooses not to log a movement, there's no mechanism to detect it in real time. The only way we discover breaches is after the fact, through witness accounts. By then, the risk has already been taken." What would fix that? Mandatory logging at the vehicle level, GPS tracking that can't be disabled, automatic alerts sent to the protection detail whenever a child is moved, regardless of who authorizes it. Dryden leaned forward. That level of surveillance would apply to senior royals as well. It would eliminate discretion entirely. It would eliminate dangerous discretion, discretion that puts children at risk. William looked at Callahan. "Is that feasible?" Callahan nodded. "We have the technology. The question is whether the family is willing to accept that level of oversight. I am. For any movement involving my children, I want full transparency, no exceptions." He turned to Edward Marsh. "Draft the new protocols. GPS tracking on all vehicles used to transport the children, automatic notifications to their protection details, real-time logging accessible to me at any time." "Understood, sir." William looked at Dryden. "And I want the Duchess's access to the children formalized. No more informal visits. Everything scheduled, everything logged. If she wants time with them, she requests it through the appropriate channels." Dryden hesitated. "That's a significant restriction on a senior royal." "It's a necessary restriction. She's demonstrated that she's unwilling or unable to follow the existing protocols, so the protocols will be redesigned to account for that." The room was silent. William continued. "I also want an external audit of the past 6 months, every transport, every interaction. I want to know if there are other incidents we've missed." Callahan made a note. "I'll coordinate with the audit team." William turned back to the guard. "You'll be reinstated to close protection effective immediately. You'll work directly with Officer Marsh to oversee implementation of the new protocols. If you encounter resistance, you report it to Edward Marsh. If Edward encounters resistance, he reports it to me. Clear?" "Clear." William stood. "The safety of my children is non-negotiable. I don't care who it offends or what institutional norms it disrupts. If the system can't protect them, I'll build a new system that does." He looked at each person in the room. Dismissed. They filed out. The guard and Officer Marsh walked together down the corridor. "Did that just happen?" "I think so. He just stripped the Duchess of informal access." "Good. She's going to fight this. Let her." Officer Marsh glanced at him. "You've changed. 2 months ago you were just following protocol. Now you're redesigning it." The guard thought about the ribbon, about the...
"Have you checked the vehicle logs?" "I can't. I don't have access anymore. Dryden restricted it after your transfer." The guard exhaled sharply. "So we have a statement from the princess, but no way to verify it?" "Not through official channels." The guard looked at her. "What are you suggesting?" Marsh hesitated. "I'm suggesting we go back to Edward Marsh. We present the princess's statement. We request a full audit of the Duchess's movements for the past 2 weeks. And if he says no, then we escalate to the prince directly." The guard considered this. It was risky. It would burn whatever goodwill they had left. But if the Duchess was still circumventing protocol, the princess was still at risk. "Do it, but don't mention me. If this comes back on someone, it should be you. You're still on the detail. You have standing." Marsh shook her head. "We're in this together." "No, you have a career to protect. I'm already reassigned. If this goes wrong, I'm expendable. You're not." She stared at him for a long moment. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." She nodded slowly. "All right, I'll contact Edward Marsh tonight." She stood and left. The guard remained seated, staring at the table.
He had been removed from the situation. He had been told to move on, but the situation had followed him anyway. At 2000, Officer Marsh called. "Edward Marsh wants to see us both. Tomorrow, 0800. "Both?" He said if we're making another accusation, he wants to hear it from both of us. He wants to make sure we're aligned. "All right. Are you ready for this?" The guard thought about the princess, about the ribbon, about the pattern that kept repeating no matter how many warnings were issued. "Yeah, I'm ready." The next morning, they met outside Edward Marsh's office. He was waiting for them, standing in the doorway, his expression grim. Inside. They entered. Marsh closed the door and gestured to the chairs. They sat. "Officer Marsh contacted me with a concern. She claims the princess made a statement suggesting ongoing, unlogged interactions with the Duchess. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "What exactly did the princess say?" Officer Marsh recounted the conversation. Marsh listened without interrupting, then turned to the guard. "And you believe this constitutes another protocol breach?" "I believe it warrants investigation. The princess used plural phrasing. That suggests multiple incidents, not one." Marsh leaned back. "Or it suggests a child conflating past events with present ones. Children don't have perfect recall. She's 7, not 3. She knows the difference between one visit and multiple visits." Marsh was silent for a moment. Then he opened his laptop and began typing. "I'll request the vehicle logs for the past 2 weeks. If there are unlogged movements, we'll find them. And if there aren't, then the princess is either misremembering or the interactions occurred on palace grounds in a way that didn't require vehicle transport, which would still be a violation if they weren't logged. Yes, but it would be harder to prove." Marsh looked up. "I need you both to understand something. The prince confronted the Duchess. He issued a direct order. If she violated that order, the consequences will be severe. But I need proof, not interpretation, not suspicion. Proof. We understand. Good. I'll have the logs by end of day. If there's something there, we'll move forward. If not, this inquiry closes, and you both return to your duties without further escalation. Agreed?" "Agreed." Marsh dismissed them. They walked back through the corridors in silence. Officer Marsh finally spoke. "What if there's nothing in the logs? Then we find another way." "There is no other way. We've used every channel we have." The guard stopped walking and looked at her. "There's always another way." At 1700, Edward Marsh called. "The logs are clean. No unlogged vehicle movements. No discrepancies." The guard felt the ground shift beneath him. "That's not possible." "It's documented fact. Every transport is logged. Every passenger is listed. The Duchess has been fully compliant." "Then the interactions happened on site." "If they did, they were informal and within common areas. That's not a protocol violation." "It is if she's instructing the princess not to talk about them." Marsh's tone hardened. "That's an allegation of misconduct. Do you have evidence?" "We have the princess's statement." "That's not evidence. That's a child's comment filtered through an adult's interpretation." The guard felt his frustration boiling over. "So what do you need? A recording? A witness? What would actually qualify as proof?" "A pattern of documented behavior that demonstrates intent to deceive or endanger. Right now, you don't have that. You have suspicion. And by the time we have proof, it might be too late." Marsh exhaled slowly. "I understand your concern, but I can't act on suspicion. I need facts." The call ended. The guard stood alone in the corridor, the phone still in his hand. He had done everything right. He had followed every protocol. He had escalated through every channel, and he had hit a wall. But he also knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Duchess had not stopped. She had just gotten better at hiding it, and if no one else was willing to confront her, he would have to find a way to force the issue himself. The guard spent the next week in a state of controlled frustration. He completed his shifts at the outer gate, maintained his professional demeanor, and avoided any conversation about the ongoing situation. But internally, he was calculating his next move. He couldn't access the logs, he couldn't monitor the princess directly, he couldn't escalate further without risking dismissal. But he could watch, and he could wait. On the 8th day, at 1100, his phone buzzed. It was Officer Marsh. The prince requested a meeting with the princess's full protection detail. "I'm bringing your name up. If he approves, you'll be reinstated temporarily as a consultant." The guard felt a flicker of hope. Why? Because he's not satisfied with the current protocols. He wants an independent review. When? Tomorrow, 1400. Be ready. The next afternoon, the guard arrived at the state apartments and was escorted to a private conference room. Prince William was already seated at the head of the table. Edward Marsh sat to his right. Officer Marsh, Nanny Calloway, and Captain Dryden were also present. At the far end sat Mr. Callahan from Royalty Protection Command. William gestured for the guard to sit. "Thank you all for coming. I've called this meeting because I'm not convinced that the current safeguarding protocols are sufficient. Despite clear directives, there remain gaps that could be exploited." He looked at the guard. "You've been the most persistent voice raising these concerns. I want to hear in your own words what you believe is still broken." The guard glanced at Dryden, who gave a curt nod. Permission granted. The guard spoke carefully. "The system relies on voluntary compliance from senior royals. When someone with discretionary authority chooses not to log a movement, there's no mechanism to detect it in real time. The only way we discover breaches is after the fact, through anomalies or witness accounts. By then, the risk has already been taken." What would fix that? Mandatory logging at the vehicle level, GPS tracking that can't be disabled, automatic alerts sent to the protection detail whenever a child is moved, regardless of who authorizes it. Dryden leaned forward. That level of surveillance would apply to senior royals as well. It would eliminate discretion entirely. It would eliminate dangerous discretion, discretion that puts children at risk. William looked at Callahan. "Is that feasible?" Callahan nodded. "We have the technology. The question is whether the family is willing to accept that level of oversight. I am. For any movement involving my children, I want full transparency, no exceptions." He turned to Edward Marsh. "Draft the new protocols. GPS tracking on all vehicles used to transport the children. Automatic notifications to their protection details. Real-time logging accessible to me at any time." "Understood, sir." William looked at Dryden. "And I want the Duchess's access to the children formalized. No more informal visits. Everything scheduled, everything logged. If she wants time with them, she requests it through the appropriate channels." Dryden hesitated. "That's a significant restriction on a senior royal." "It's a necessary restriction. She's demonstrated that she's unwilling or unable to follow the existing protocols, so the protocols will be redesigned to account for that." The room was silent. William continued. "I also want an external audit of the past 6 months. Every transport, every interaction. I want to know if there are other incidents we've missed." Callahan made a note. "I'll coordinate with the audit team.